You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and today going to be talking about retail media with Chris from IAB. We actually just got connected, I don't know, a few months ago, and we'd done a little bit with some people at IAB and hosted an event and then got connected. I can't even remember, Chris, how did we originally get connected? But it was a fantastic conversation that kind of led into, hey, would love to have people in the network kind of understand a little bit more about not only what you do, but around retail media as a whole. But Chris, I'll kind of kick it over to you if you want to do an intro on yourself, a little background and, the IAB, and then we'll kind of jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Sounds perfect. Yeah, Chris Bruderle, Vice President of Industry Insights and Content Strategy, IAB, Interactive Advertising Bureau, for those that don't know. And we set the standards, do research, and congregate the entire digital advertising ecosystem, buy and sell side, to solve problems and essentially, raise the tide of the entire industry so all the boats go with it, if you will. I've been at the IAB. It'll be 5 years, surprisingly. I can't believe how quickly that time has gone, in March or February. And it's been really an amazing experience. I came over because Randall Rothenberg, our previous CEO, really kind of introduced me to the direct-to-consumer market and that entire marketing model, which I was fascinated about and I wanted to get involved in. But since then, I've been doing privacy work, data, video, retail media. It's really been an exciting time, and I don't have to tell you that I think the digital advertising ecosystem needs organizations like the IAB now more than ever. So majority of my career has actually been on the sell side. I started on the agency side as a system media planner, but then since then, I worked in analytics and research at Martha Stewart, Time Inc., Condé, and then right before here, I was 7 years running the research and analytics department at the Daily Beast for both the business and the advertising side. So psyched to be here and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun conversation. So let's dive into just retail media just a little bit from your perspective. How should brands be thinking about it? And then we'll just wander through this conversation as a whole, because I think this could be an 18-hour podcast on retail media.
Yeah.
But we'll try to squeeze it in under an hour for sure. But it's what everybody's grappling with right now. And everybody's being asked for more media dollars, and attribution is out there that people are looking for. Anyways, would love to hear your thoughts in this space.
Yeah. Well, it's driving growth in the digital advertising ecosystem, right? Like that and CTV are really the only channels that are growing, double digit right now in terms of advertising revenue and spend. And what's really driving that is, one thing that people forget is that e-commerce shopping is up, right? It really did get a jolt over COVID, and it continues to grow. And I would argue that it continues to grow beyond the projection that it was before 2020, right? So you have more people buying online. Obviously, you have the valuable point of sale data, and you have the very valuable customer data that brands have not had access to in the past, particularly if you're a beauty or a CPG brand. And at the same time, because that's the retailer's first-party data, you are now in a more privacy-compliant or privacy-safe place. So there's some pretty big wins right there. The ability to access all this data, to do it in a privacy-compliant way. More and more consumers are going there. Compound that with the fact that significant signal loss on the open web and in the app ecosystem across search and social forces advertisers and brands to look for those type of signals and opportunities in new places now. And retail media came along at the same time.
Quick, so just for people as a whole, So when you're talking like deprecation of third-party cookies or the iOS 14.5 update, right?
Yep.
Everybody hitting ask app not to track. And then,
Yep.
so the loss of that attribution piece, when you're really looking for attribution, but there's also the privacy side in the retail media, right? Because you're not owning the customer per se at that point in time. So you don't have to collect any of their information. You're just pumping money in.
Correct.
Awesome.
So there's a couple different things happening. Well, first of all, how great is it to, buy ads in a commerce environment and know within a certain time frame to a certain extent if they work, right? And knowing that using the retailer's first party data, that's a privacy compliant mechanism right there, and it's great from a closed loop standpoint. So that's great. Well, what you're talking about is the fact that with technology such as data clean rooms, the brands can bring their data in to enrich the buy to the data clean room of the retailer. And the retailer can also share their insights with the brand through the data clean room, right? So both sides are kind of feeding off each other and helping each other with data they had not had in the past in a privacy compliant way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I'm bringing in essentially my brands, my target, demographic brands, maybe customers have actually bought, being able to upload the details around them, but clean it up so that it's anonymous, but then match that to the retailer, and the retailer can give me feedback at the same time if that is working or not. And oh, by the way, if it is, we've got 100 times that number of people that are in the network that we can actually hit. Now, you don't actually know who it is, right? But then we can give you metrics on the back end to show if you worked, or you can just file POS data and it's up. Then you're going to say it worked.
Exactly it. That's it. And that's incredibly powerful. And what even makes it more powerful is this ability to target offsite as well, right? I mean, there's only so much space or inventory that the retailers have because, only so many people go to retailer sites. So now what you're seeing is these partnerships with, Walmart's DSP helping to power, NBCU sports targeting, right? Targeting that content on NBCU. You have the Walmart DSP and the Trade Desk partnering, and it's helping to power CTV targeting. You're seeing Criteo and Shopify. You're seeing Lowe's and Yahoo and Pinterest partnering. So you kind of have this like first party data, the technology combined with the technology from data clean rooms, defined with demand side platforms. And you kind of have a privacy compliant way to do some really smart targeting across some incredibly powerful ecosystems, being retail media and CTV. And CTV is the only other channel that's growing double digits as well, right? And that's no coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, I want to jump into CTV. We have to put a pin in that because, like, this is going back to the conversation we're having, which is I think the precipice for this episode.
Yeah,
it's kind of what you're laying around out is that all the brands for a few years now have just been peppered with the requests for retail media dollars. Just give us money, give us money, we're to give us money. And a lot of times they're dumping money in, but they're not seeing anything come back out. And I think a lot of that is because these partnerships haven't been happening and the DSPs haven't been there in place. And so you get this, if that many people aren't going to the retailer's website, you're not getting a lot of performance. Now, outside of Amazon, right? Like the Amazon piece, people know that works.
Right.
But the rest of these retail media networks, they weren't really working. But what you're outlining here is, hey, everybody, hold tight. Like they are figuring it out. They realize brands do need a return, obviously, but they are figuring out, and you're going to get this massive explosion in total dollars, I think, dumping into these other media networks outside of Amazon because of the exposure they can get. And you're right. It's privacy compliant, right? It's a closed system, and yet you can target a similar demographic off the retailer's website.
Incredibly powerful. I mean, signal loss, signal loss, cookie deprecation has really, really hurt the advertising industry. And at the same time, privacy, the state laws and privacy has gotten more and more, it's just continued to evolve and has gotten more strict. You now have a law in California called the Delete Act, where essentially any California citizen can go to one site, one place, and just have their name deleted from the databases of over 100 of data and advertising companies in one fell swoop, right? And that is a perfect example of how much power is now being put in the hands of consumers, rightfully so. And that is something the IAB stands for. We need to protect consumer privacy. But at the same time, it just makes it so much more difficult for advertisers. So they now have seen significant signal deprecation, which means targeting is not as precise, which means reporting is not as precise, and which means attribution is not as precise. So they need to now find these places where they can get those things again in a privacy compliant way. The retail media networks are sitting on this gold mine of data, right? So that's what's helped drive this. And I would be remiss not to mention the fact that it's a great business model for the retail media networks, right? Like on-site, I think Boston Consulting Group said this, the margin for on-site for retail media networks is 70 to 90%. Off-site, it's 30%. When their margins for, selling soap and all that kind of stuff is single-digit percentages, right? So it's a great business model for the retail media networks as well. So it is helping a lot of different constituencies.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, and on the DSP side and the traffic and the attribution side and the growth side, I've talked to multiple brands now on the Amazon side of the Amazon algorithm gives so much weight, right, to that off Amazon traffic that brands now, are using, paid search and social dollars to drive to a detail page and then overlap that on top of the actual DSP to then hit offsite to drive back to the direct consumer site. So, this real intricate way of looking at the retail media networks and how to best utilize them, like what you're outlining. So most retail media networks don't have all of that built in, but if they're forming the right partnerships and you can get a different scale, that is awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. And, we're seeing some really, part of another reason why retail media is really taken off is you have Amazon and Walgreens setting up their own DSPs, right? Anytime that you can bid stream demand, it's going to drive dollars. It incentivize, it makes it easier for advertisers to spend dollars. It's why you're seeing the streamers and the broadcasters create self-service networks and continue to evolve and build better self-service networks so the long tail can just completely go in there and spend dollars. And, retail media benefits from that as well. But, that's one of the hurdles with retail media networks is it needs to, be more programmatically enabled. And it needs to be able to happen across the different retail media networks so the buy side can make comparisons from an apples to apples standpoint across the different networks. But you have all these things working together. You've got data, you've got programmatic, you've got privacy, you've got more people online shopping commerce, you have CTV, you have the streaming companies needing to leverage first-party data, but they have this incredible IP. There's a lot of really interesting things that are happening, and I'm going to go. I could go off in a little bit of a tangent here, but I think we're at a little bit of a inflection point in that you have CTV, you have retail media networks, you have by the way, Web3 and the metaverse are still happening.
No,
we just kind of took our eye off that for a little while.
Right, it's a good note. It was not put on pause. We just took our eye off it for a little bit. There's still a lot of development in that space.
It's in its 2002 time period right now.
Yeah.
right after the bubble burst,
Mm-hmm.
right, kind of that down time, and people kind of took their eye off it. But then next thing that happens is social media takes off in the late aughts, and suddenly the internet is back in a big way, and it looks completely different, and we're all on our mobile phones. So, I think the fact that you have those things I just mentioned, plus you have social commerce, plus you kind of have the next generation of social that will happen. It's an incredibly exciting time. It's an incredibly challenging time. It's also an incredibly exciting time.
Yeah, if I want to pick a bunch of those apart, but the next one has to be CTV.
Yeah.
Because people are trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And people know they should be doing it, but it's hard to get started or understand what a performance metrics look like, how much budget should go into it.
Yep.
And then, my opinion when I look at it is, in the past, when you look at any kind of TV advertising, you think of it major branding, right? You don't know where it's going. You're just blasting it out there, and it's more of a branding play. But the brands that I've seen win are using it as performance marketing. Like, I'm going to get very, very targeted with the message and the demographic and who I'm serving it to.
Mm-hmm.
And would love to hear your thoughts and kind of advice for brands that are either kicking off CTV, wondering if they should, or are in the thick of it. Like, how should they be looking at it?
Yeah, our research that we do on CTV every year, our video quote unquote ad spend and strategy study, when we ask buyers why they purchase CTV, it's all about the data, right? Like, in the past, it's been, there's great data opportunities there within the sight, sound, and motion, well-lit, high-quality content environments, data that they weren't able to get in linear. Now you're able to get this in CTV. So that's an incredibly powerful opportunity for them. For the small guys, you're starting to see over the last 5 years, the direct-to-consumer brands buy into there. They wouldn't buy into there if there wasn't data, if the data wasn't there, and if they weren't able to prove the return on investment, right? So now so many of the major streamers and broadcasters have self-service platforms. They have data clean room. You can enrich the data, test and learn, and figure out how to grow your business through there, or to grow your audience through there, or your incremental reach through there, and then find the right spot, because there's a lot of opportunities there, and the reach continues to grow in CTV. It is now a reach play as well, as it wasn't as much in the past couple of years. Huge opportunity in CTV. It's kind of in a weird spot right now because of the actors strike, right? I think we're hitting 10 months of that. So there's a little bit of dearth of original content. But once that strike ends and we start to pick up with the original content coming back, it's going to be incredibly powerful again, as a lot of great new original content comes out.
Is there anybody who shouldn't be testing and learning? Because I think it's pretty much everybody should be testing and learning in this space. Set aside a portion of your budget. If you're still planning for, 2024, you have to at least be sampling. You have to be able to speak to it at this point in time, right? I mean, you have to.
Absolutely. Search and social, especially social, the rates are really high there right now. It's incredibly competitive. You're probably saturated. It absolutely behooves you to try other channels, and CTV is one of the fastest growing ones, and it just continues to evolve from a data standpoint, and from a functionality and tools standpoint, that you have to go for it. You have to figure it out. That and retail media are next, in terms of where a lot of big gains can happen for brands and advertisers. And the broadcasters and the streamers are getting so much better at moving the functionality down the funnel, creating new forms. It's not just the 15-second and the 30 seconds anymore. They continue to iterate on shoppable ads, QSR codes, enabling people to take action, I read an article the other day about what Netflix is trying to do with their ad-supported tier in terms of like being able to sponsor a particular show. And then it would just be at the front of the show, and then it wouldn't, there'd be no other ads, but you could, they'd be the sponsor of a show. There's the ability to show ads in the first 3 episodes and then not show ads after that. The Netflix and the other streamers are really trying to do new things to move away from the 15 and 30 second, get people more engaged, move it down the funnel, use its reach to get the funnel at the same time. So there's a lot of fun stuff going on. It's going to continue to evolve.
Yeah, I totally agree. It actually, the CTV space reminds me of the Amazon DSP space a couple years ago, where there's so much low-hanging fruit. There's so much, right at the bottom of the funnel because you are so targeted with who you're going after.
Yep.
Right? You just say, hey, anybody who bought soap. You can say, hey, anybody who bought soap that lives in the Southwest. You can start has an income above $100,000 and has bought pet food. Okay, that's who we're going to, sell dog shampoo to. And we're going to advertise so specifically to them that you're right. Like if you're in the paid search and social, or even on Amazon and, the PPC side, the rates are getting so high. But there's very few brands actually targeting that specific person. And it's actually a little bit less expensive with a higher conversion rate, and you're actually off Amazon. That's where I picture CTV at right now, is you're going to have brands who jump in and they're going to have disproportionate gains because they're the only ones there that are playing. And they're the only ones there playing with it the way it needs to be played with, not just a huge, I'm going to build a brand, but hey, I'm going to do performance marketing at a very, very targeted level, and I'm going to go for conversion and new customer acquisition. That's where I kind of see this CTV space right now. I'm telling everybody, like, you got to try it, right? You don't talk to your agency. Mountain is out there. Like, there's a lot of different platforms that you can use to jump in, but make sure you're jumping in with the right content. And what I really like what you're saying is how everybody's looking at, the Netflixes, the streaming networks are looking at, okay, how can we do the testing and learning around each person so we can deliver the right ad and the right ad content and the right ad style, the right ad length to who's ever viewing?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and again, it comes back to retail media. I mean, the 5 major retail media players, and I use Watka to remember them, Walgreens, Amazon, Target, Kroger, and Albertsons, are all ventured aggressively into the CTV space, right? It's that leveraging of their data to help power where consumer eyeballs are. And particularly, this is a space, CTV, that needs to have this additional element of this data and the closed loop reporting. So it's incredibly powerful. I think what's another thing that's really interesting about it, and I was thinking about this the other day, social had so much of this, has so much of this, but it doesn't have the footprint into commerce the way the retail media network sites do, right? So it'll be, right? So think about the advantage that the retail media networks have. The retail media networks don't have as much data, but they're getting it.
Yeah.
And getting it in a more privacy compliant way, but they have the shopping. And then you have social, which has a ton of data, but doesn't really have the shopping, but is trying in earnest to get there. And a lot of shopping happens on social. I mean, this is going to be a really cool foot race to watch.
It's going to be so much. Yeah, it's going to be so much fun. Because live streaming, TikTok's going to figure it out, right? That's just the reality. The podcast before this was with Joseph over at WPIC. Jacob, his brother is Joseph, but Jacob over at WPIC, where we talked a little bit about what's going on, in China and the streaming. Yeah, it's, live streaming for purchasing product is massive, like 800 million, almost $1 billion or something like that. It's the parent company of TikTok doing it. Like, they're going to figure it out. It is going to work. And I think we're probably just a few years away, but once it catches fire, it's going to take off. It's going to, TikTok made me buy it as a trend, but what if you didn't have to leave, right? What if you just bought it right there, right there?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. And I think the other social networks, the Metas of the world, one innovation that they've made the last couple of years is that not having to leave their environments is really powerful. To make it is so easy to shop on social now. It's dangerously easy. The question is how much shopping you're going. I think here's the thing that I've been struggling with the last couple of years, because as I worked on the DTC research and initiative here at the IAB since 2019, we've been paying very close attention to China and retail commerce on the Pacific Rim, because online shopping is much more sophisticated than it is here. There's a couple of different reasons for that. Number one is that the geography of China is more consolidated, so there's not as much retail on the outside. They don't have the suburban sprawl that we have, the developed suburban sprawl that we have. So because so many folks live in the larger cities, and they have such an amazing last mile network with the guys on the bikes and the motorcycles and the drones and everything. It's a lot easier to deliver the last mile. And, that culture is very mobile addicted. And the apps are all kind of concentrated into one place, because that's where your social and your shopping and your banking and your chatting are all in the one place. It's just it just powers e-commerce. I don't know. It'll be curious to see how live stream shopping evolves here in the US. I think that we're going to find out in the next 2 or 3 years. There are things like, I would keep a very close eye on what happens with the holiday seasons, because that's when retail shopping testing in the US really starts to happen. You're going to see it with a lot of the department stores and the fashion shops get really aggressive every year, even more so in terms of live stream shopping around the holidays. They're virtualizing it, which is super cool. But it'll be curious to see how live stream shopping, I don't think it's ever going to be like as it is in China, but it does have room to evolve. The question is how quickly that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch, though. I've been picking your brain for a while. Like, I don't mind throwing it over to you. Like, I do appreciate, just you being kind of like open to just the conversation. Other things like the questions you want to throw back my way, or things you're thinking about. I mean, more than happy to jump into any of those as well. And then there's a few more things that are top of mind for me, but I don't want to completely monopolize the conversation.
Oh, I appreciate that. What's really interesting? You guys have a direct line. So many of your clients are the investor community.
No.
And I would love to hear, I'm not sure if you're able to comment on this, but I participate in some of the calls that you folks have. And primarily so many of those calls are to educate the investor community on what's happening in the media space. I'm curious, and the IAB has been leaning into this more. I'm curious what the 10,000-foot view of the investor community is right now on the digital media space. Is it bullish? Is it bearish?
I don't know. So that's because that's on the strategy side. I don't moderate any of those events, so I don't have the best feeling for that.
Got it.
From the brand side, from this Connectivision, I mean, everybody's exasperated with it, which is everybody's asking them for money in a time where profitability is the number one focus for almost everybody that I talk to. That's startup, that's Fortune 500 brands, right? It's profitability. And when you're looking at profitability, they're starting to factor into what are the actual paid media costs, and then what are the retail media costs that are going into it. They want to know at the end of the day, did we make money? Where for the longest time, because, not just Amazon, but the direct-to-consumer side was just a rounding error for a lot of budgets, and now it's massive. Yep. And now they're like, hey, are those guys actually making money, or are they just one of the, like some of these D2C darlings that, you end up finding out they're actually, not making any money. Yeah, they were making $10 per pair of shoes, but they were spending $20 to get that person to make $10.
Yep.
And so there's a lot more pressure on the profitability side. And so where do you put the money? And like you're saying, because right now there seems to be fewer people out there ready to buy. So everybody's fighting over the same customer. There's more people fighting over the same customer. So yet the rates are going up. That's Amazon, that's paid search social. It's getting more expensive to acquire somebody. And yet the retail media networks can figure out, like you're saying, these partnerships where you can expand the reach, you can show the conversion, you can give the data, and you can then say, hey, we can iterate this on, my watch is answering me, but we can actually expand your total reach, because we can overlay that on top of all of our customer base. Now we're getting to a point where if the retail media networks can prove that they can do that and show growth, money is going to pour into it.
Yes.
Money is going to pour into it, because now we're talking about, we're not aging out a demographic like with Meta, right? Or targeting a certain one. You're like, everybody shops. That's just the reality.
Absolutely. Everybody shops.
Yeah. And that's going to solve a lot of issues, I think, at the end of the day.
You alluded to something. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Please jump in. Yeah.
You alluded to something a moment ago that I think is really interesting as well, is that we are now clearly out of this grow at all cost model, right? Just get as big as you possibly can, and we'll worry about the dollars later. We'll worry about the finances later. And that is now over, right? And as painful as that is for a lot of folks in this industry and a lot of companies in this industry, that have had to lay off folks, which is a terrible thing and is awful. It's to a certain extent, it's an irresponsible way to do your business. Now, if people are giving you money to do this, I would have taken it too, right? But it creates a little bit of a bubble where essentially, you're doubling down on saying, just get as big as you possibly can, and we'll figure it out later. And that's really dangerous. I would rather, maybe hindsight is 2020, but I think the smarter play, and I'm more conservative from a financial standpoint. I would rather have the quality first than the quantity, right? And there's been, some really cool side effects to that. You have BuzzFeed, for example, which, grew at great cost, but they built an amazing, BuzzFeed News was, they created an amazing product, and they won a Pulitzer, right? I mean, and that's incredible. That powers not only the economy, that empowers our democracy, and it brings a whole new generation into understanding the importance of news and the importance of whistleblowing, and connecting with the younger generations. And Vice was the same way. Like Vice, was an amazing voice for years. And if investors are going to give these companies money, and they gave it to the Facebooks of the world as well, it's an amazing thing. And it was for a while. And course correcting needs to happen. But we are now in this course correcting space now, right? And
100%. And if you're not post Series A and profitable, you're probably not getting money. You better have a killer business plan and immediate path to profitability.
Yes.
And that is on brand side. It's also on service provider, tech startup, right? Anybody could have done a tech startup for the last couple of years. And now that money is just drying up really quickly. And I think it's right, again, it's never a good thing, but a lot of that tech that was being developed was over-promising, under-delivering, and just taking people's money and spending it.
That's right.
Now we're going to be getting to where people are going to get refined, right, by the fire over the next couple of years. And we're going to come out a year to 2 years from now, and people are going to be blown away by the tech that's going to enable them. And I'm not just talking AI, but the back end powered by AI, right? Machine learning, essentially.
Yep.
To understand data sets that they never could have before, to be more targeted, to be more profitable, to spend less money, make more, and provide customers with a better user experience. And because the reality is, I think we all like advertising to a little bit. If you show me I have something I've never seen before that I like, that's what I want to see. And if you can learn that those are the things I want to see, show them to me all the time. Like,
absolutely. And we have research that backs that up. A lot of folks have research that backs that up. And I'm going to sound like an old timer here, but I grew up before there was an internet. The internet really started when I was in college. So I had a life before the internet, and, really good TV, really good magazines had great ad experiences in them without data. And it brought the experience up. Think about the entire Condé Nast model.
right.
Or think about if you watch, I'm a big tennis fan. I love seeing those Roger Federer's Rolex ads when I'm watching Wimbledon in the summertime, right? I mean, that's a great ad experience, and the context works, and that's why we've seen contextual come back. And if we can just figure out how to serve the right ads to the right people in a non-creepy way, it's going to go a long way. Here's what concerns me about AI and generative AI. There's a lot of concerns, but one of the concerns that a lot of people aren't talking about, I feel, is the market realities, the inequality of the market realities, and the fact that large language models and the processing costs a ton of money, and that's going to favor the larger few companies that are able to pay for that, right? So I am concerned about the long tail having the access to that, to afford and access that type of technology. So the democratization of generative AI and AI overall is going to need to happen. Otherwise, we're just going to have 4 or 5 companies.
Right.
All the tools.
Crazy. Other things that are like top of mind, like this is super fun. We got maybe 5 minutes left. But like, what are you most excited about over the next, I don't know, year, 2 years? I'm really excited about our industry getting its act together in terms of protecting consumer privacy while finding ways to kind of get those quote unquote signals back, right? So it's forcing us to be better at what we do while protecting each other, right? That's incredibly powerful, right? I mean, how correct was the data beforehand anyway? I mean, TrueSet just came out with a statistic that said 50% of the physical address and email addresses in the US don't match. So how correct was the data beforehand, right? So if we can figure out ways to protect consumers' privacy and be just as smart or even smarter than before, that's a win-win, and that's incredibly powerful. And that's going to create a lot of jobs. A lot of jobs. We have to get smarter as a country in terms, I'm going to go out on a limb here a little bit. We have to get better at STEM education for our generation. And my wife's a high school teacher. She teaches AP psychology, and I was showing her numbers the other day about the testing results of the U.S. versus the other countries, and we've really plummeted since 2020. And I firmly do believe that we may be losing to China in the ability of testing and the interest in science and engineering and technology and math.
We need to get better at those things so we can compete from an AI standpoint in the future. But I do think that this challenge that we have is an opportunity. I know that sounds a little hokey, but I 100% believe that. I got out of working in the private sector, if you will, working for publishers, because I felt like I was just putting out fire after fire after fire after fire after fire, and I wasn't getting anywhere. And I want to help the publishers. I want to help this industry. And I think the best way to do that was to work in an IAB. So I'm really optimistic that we can be a much better industry than we've ever have been. And we can do that across the next couple of years.
No, I love it. Yeah, I totally agree. I think we can. And I think the privacy standpoint, the fact that you can help, both the consumer as well as, the brands that are out there grow, like, I think we can do it now. And I don't think we could have done it 3 years ago. But the amount of advancement and the amount of focus and the amount of money that's flowing into here is saying we need to get it all together, and we've got all the tools. We just got to figure out how to use them all. And while we don't have everything in place yet, over the next couple of years, this should be able to be in a much better spot. And brands should feel better and safer about, we talked a lot about privacy because it doesn't get talked about enough. And yet still get in front of people that they need to get in front of to help move the products that they want to move. So,
yeah. And we have to be careful. We, one of the key things that we do is that we lobby at the federal and state level in terms of making sure that the legislators understand that their new legislation to protect people's privacy is actually more of a blunt tool than it should be, and that there will be collateral damage and side effects, particularly to smaller businesses, because then you have all these costs that will come over to them. It will be less effective. We need to move forward the narrative that that the free open internet is actually good for all of us, and that the free and open internet is powered by advertising. Advertising just needs to get its act together in terms of protecting consumer privacy and serving right ads to the right people in a privacy compliant way. But just saying cutting off all the signals for privacy's sake is not the right move. So there's a couple different things we need to do to keep this moving forward.
Yeah. Well, Chris, this has been so much fun. We're gonna have to do these probably on a regular basis at some point in time. I would love to. Just to stay on top of it and see where we're at, check up along the way. And it'd be great to look back a year, 2 years from now, and you're like, yeah, we nailed it. Or, hey, we didn't realize 18 new technologies were to come in. The metaverse is going to take over, and we're living in the Pixar movie WALL-E. But thanks again, my friend. This has been so much fun. And thanks everybody for listening to this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Everybody take care. Stay safe.
Take care. Thank you.
Back next time.